so one of my TLM friends was also very involved in the Ordinariate parish in Boston. And he said, Mike, you talk about this all the time. He said, have you ever actually been to an Ordinariate service? I said, no, of course not. He said, will you just come with me once and just see it? And I said, yeah, all right, if it'll make you feel better. I said, it's good opposition research. And so I went, and it was in the Mass was in a side chapel in a Roman Catholic church in, outside of Boston. And the priest, who is now a very dear friend of mine, Father Jürgen Leas, was started off as a charismatic Episcopalian Anglo-Catholic. Mm-hmm. And he's a big, friendly guy with a big booming voice who preaches like a Baptist. He's always talking about Jesus, Mm-hmm. And so I was sitting through this service, and I was like, this is the worst of every world. It's like, it's not the Book of Common Prayer. It's close. It's pretty good. But it's in this small rinky-dink chapel in a Roman Catholic church. And the priest sounds like a Baptist. I was like, this is confirmation bias. And I was really happy that I'd gone. But then it came time for communion. And I going to Catholic schools, I always, I was told to go up and cross my arms and receive a blessing from the priest, which I obviously didn't do when I was involved in Satanism. But then my last year or whatever of high school, I started doing it just to help the line flow. And so I was, I did that. I went up to get a blessing. I figured it, my opinion was that the Roman Catholic Church was fine for continental Europe. It's a true church. I had nothing against them, but they don't belong in the Anglosphere. And so I went up to receive a blessing, and I was the last person because I was sitting in the back, and I knelt and I crossed my arms, and I've said this a bunch of times, so it's possible that someone's heard this story before. But as the priest was coming down the line, the communion line, and in giving the Eucharist, I had this feeling that it's a feeling that I used to get when I was picking up a friend of mine, my ex-girlfriend, from the airport, because she was Australian. And when this person that you love very much is, coming through the gate, you can sense them before you can see them. And I had this like excitement, this expectation. And I was like, oh, I wonder what this is. This is odd. And he came down, he was going slowly, and he came coming down. And I said, oh, it's Jesus. It's Jesus Christ. And he stopped over me. He said, I bless you in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And I felt like my heart stopped. C.S. Lewis says because he was wounded at the Somme, I think, and he was shot through with shrapnel. And he said, I was certain that I was dying. He said, in a way, I probably was. He said, he said, I wasn't afraid. He said, it didn't feel like the moment for either courage or fear. It was just, and I had that feeling. I was like, I'm dead. I died. And I sat there, and it took me a couple seconds, and then I realized I wasn't dead. And so I stood up, and my knees were weak, and I walked back to my pew, and I just cried and cried. And then and then it was over, and everyone went to coffee hour, and the priest, Father Leas, who's the most wonderful man I've ever met, he walked up to me. He said, "Hey, you're new here," and he looked at me and he saw that my eyes were red, and he said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I want to become a Catholic." And I've never, from that day, had a moment's doubt. So I didn't want to become ordinariate. I love the ordinariate, but I didn't want to become the ordinary because I wanted to be absolutely sure that I wasn't just accommodating myself to the Catholic Church. I wanted to make sure that I was, I wasn't just, going to where all the conservative Anglicans were going. I wanted to make sure. So I went to the Latin Mass, which I hated. A friend of mine took me in college once, and I hated it because it's in many ways very similar to the Anglican liturgy, but the priest doesn't face the people. There aren't as many hymns. It's in Latin. There's none of the Cranmerian English. A lot of it's very quiet, and I didn't like it at all. It was I could probably, in a cerebral way, recognize that there was beauty there, but I didn't care for it. And so I went to this beautiful parish, St. Adelaide's in Peabody, Massachusetts, and
to a Latin Mass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was but over time, I figured it out. I grew to love it, and I still love it. And the priests there, Father David Lewis and Father Raymond Vander Mortel, they did everything for me. They were wonderful, and I was received, within a couple of months, and I made my first confession.
I want to get to that, but before I do, it's not as if you hadn't experienced the ritual of something like the Eucharist in your Anglican church.
No, oh yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because I
could
could say someone saying, well, you were just moved by this beautiful ritual, but no, you were in an Anglican church that presumably did something that looked very similar.
Practically the same thing. They believe that they have the Eucharist. The Anglo-Catholics believe that they have the Eucharist, and they reference it, and they have Eucharistic adoration. I'd been to Catholic churches, and I'd done it. I'd been to the ordinary parish, but I'd been to nicer Catholic churches. I'd done this many times before, but God decided that was the moment to reveal Himself, and that was I had this experience of the Eucharist, and I've had it's I've never had a doubt about this, and the sacraments are efficacious, and you know that, and I think people that aren't part of the Catholic Church don't realize what it's like. I was at Divine Liturgy a couple of weeks ago, and my daughter is at the perfect height right now, where if I hold her, she can kick me between the legs.
Nice.
And she kept doing it during liturgy, and she was being naughty, and I was not in the right mood, and so I went up to receive the Eucharist, and then and it was like the very first time, that first time in the Ordinariate chapel, and I just felt it washing over me, and so I took her out back, because I had to take her with me, but I went out back and into the outside the church, and I started to cry and cry and cry, and I kissed her on the forehead, and she got very distressed. She said, "Papa, why are you crying?" I said, "Because I'm happy." And I'd been so mad at her, and I just loved her, and she started to cry too, and to laugh, and we were just laughing. And I said to God in my heart, I was like, what happened? And he said, we tried fatherhood your way. Now we're going to try it my way. And God's been very good to me. He's time and time again. The sacraments just work. They change you. The grace, the infusion of the grace. And, we're Christians. We believe that God is everywhere. We believe that grace is everywhere. But the sacraments really are something special. And you can feel that infusion. Not always. Sometimes, you just go through the motions, unfortunately. But there's absolutely no reason why that should have happened. I should have just gone back and grumbled in my pew.
Yes.
But He flipped that switch in my heart. And He does that sometimes, I'm sure you've had experiences like that where you receive the sacrament. It's usually when you least expect it. It's like when God catches you completely off guard and just bombards you with grace. and sweetness and light.
T-bones you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't have, this is, again, I'm just a very bad son. I don't have as much of a devotion to the sacraments as I should, but I think it's because I take it for granted. God's been so good to me with all of this. I've never had a moment to doubt.
Hey, thank you so much for watching. Before you go, do us a favor, leave a comment, let us know what you thought of the video, like, and subscribe.